All righty. Hello. Hello. I'm going to say hi to some. Hi, Sarah. Hi, Jose. Hi, Jamie. Hi. I just can't read that. I did get glasses, but I can now see. So, hello from Vancouver Island. By the way, Vancouver Island. Can you see these two?
I can.
You can. So you can wave at Michelle.
Hi, Michelle.
Meredith is bowling in. Jesse Jones. There we go. Okay. Well, we are now right at sort of 3 p.m. East Coast time, right? Hi, y'all from Texas. By law, everyone from Texas has to say y'all in terms of what they. By the way, plural of y'all. Do you know plural of y'all?
Y'alls.
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 All. What is the difference between use all, y'alls, or all y'all?
Geography. Geography is the difference. Yes.
Is that true?
I don't know, but it sounded good.
And what's the difference between soda and pop? Geography too.
Oh, that's definitely a geography thing. Absolutely.
So west of the Mississippi, it's pop. Anyway, hi everybody. Hi. I'm just chatting here with Juanita. I think we should just go ahead and dive in, if that's all right with everybody. Hopefully everyone can see us okay. So it's 12 o'clock, at least it is in California time. So we're going to dive into a number of different things this afternoon. Obviously, over the last 3 weeks and more, what we've had laid bare, something that I'm sure folks in the Black community would be like, well, we should have laid this bare 150 years ago. But we've had laid bare that this country is riven with systemic racism through all sorts of institutions that should not be applying a hierarchy to different races and then taking differential action based on that putative hierarchy. And we've seen the police, we've seen education in the prison system, we've seen it in education, we've seen it in the way that Black entrepreneurs don't get access to the same investment opportunities that others do. We've seen that across the board. And yes, I think the Black community will say, well, 150 years ago was pretty obvious too, but I suppose the only good news is that we're having this time now and not 50 years from now. And so the challenge for us all, and it is for us all, is how do we make this not be a moment, as one sign said, but a movement. And of course, the way to do that is to figure out how we can all take action. How can we all take authentic action? And as you think about, well, what sort of action can you take, you obviously you think about your own race, your own gender, your own socioeconomic status, but you can also think about your own personality strengths. And as we all know, your most sustainable, authentic action will come out of those things that you naturally do anyway. So we thought, wouldn't it be great to go through these 9 strengths roles and talk about authentic action? And I invited, as you can see, my colleague, Dr. Juanita Daly, on to help us go through these strengths roles and think about authentic action. Because as a certified standout coach for us, Juanita has expertise around the standout instrument itself and strengths in general. And of course, as a member of the Black community, she's been trying to help people find success and joy, as per your shirt, and fulfillment in a country that is still riven by racism. So her perspective on that we thought would be super useful and intriguing. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We're going to go through these 9 strengths roles. To begin with, though, Juanita, I wonder if, toss it to you, I wonder if you could share a little bit about your previous work, how you got here on this phone call, what do you call it, Instagram, with me. Is that right?
Yeah, okay. So, hi everyone. So how my standout journey happened, for about 17 years, I worked for a church and just loved doing that because it was about human development in a spiritual sense. And so I went and got my doctorate in strategic leadership and felt that it was time for me to get more into the marketplace and do those things. And I found out, I knew about standout, I knew about strengths, but the interesting thing, what happened was in 19, I said, I think I want to find out how I can get more involved with Marcus Buckingham and the work that they do, because I met a lady named Sam Trinka from facilitation work we did together.
Hi,
Sam's
Sam.
incredible. Hi, Sam. And so before the end of the month, I'm going to reach out to Sam. Well, January 10th, Sam reached out to me and said, you know, we're looking for some folks, you know, at Marcus Buckingham. You know, we need to diversify a little bit. Is that something you'd be interested in? And I said, yeah, absolutely. And so that started my standout journey. And it's just been wonderful ever since. I have a personal mission statement, which is to affirm, enhance, and facilitate love, excellence, and service. And I do that through leadership, because for me, leadership is service. Now, I'm hearing a whole lot of feedback. Are you hearing it too, Marcus?
I'm not. You're coming through crisp as...
Well, that's that stimulator in me.
No, Amy,
okay.
If anyone, yeah, Sam Trinka doesn't know one of those people. But if you can't hear me, or if you can't hear Juanita in any way, just let us know and we'll panic. Is probably what we'll do.
We don't panic.
In terms of your journey now, can you talk to us a little bit about how does strengths play into, right now we're dealing with a season of reckoning around racism in this country. Well, I guess first of all, can you talk a little bit about your experience of that? You've got 3 kids, you know, a husband, life partner you share your life with. Can you talk about your experience in terms of this? How do you find success and fulfillment in a country that is still dealing with its racist strains?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. Like you mentioned, I have a husband who does a lot of traveling for work, and sometimes he's in places that there are not a lot of people that look like us. And so I do get concerned because my husband is 6 feet tall and he's a big dude. He used to play football, and he doesn't smile as much unless he knows you. So people may take it the wrong way and be threatened just by his presence and his stature. So it is something that I am concerned about. And then I have a son who is 16, he'll be 17 this year. This boy is 6 feet tall and 200 pounds. And I wonder, and I say wonder and not worry intentionally, because he goes to a private school in an affluent neighborhood, you know, will he be seen as a threat? And he's one of the sweetest kids you'd ever want to meet, very considerate. But these are the things that are front of mind. Years ago, when I was younger and my hair was not as long, I got stopped. I've been profiled by the police. So it's happened. And for me, it's just a matter of just trying to have the right perspective. And the most important thing, as it relates to my husband and when it's time for my son to be out on his own, is just making sure that you understand, we want you to get home safe. You know, we want you to, whatever encounter that you have with the police, we want to make sure that you leave that alive and that you get home. And if there's any trauma that you experience as a result of it, we'll deal with it. But the most important thing is to get home alive. So that's the thing that sometimes is front of mind for me, but I don't dwell on it, because otherwise I don't think I would be as effective.
So I was talking to a friend and a colleague of mine who was saying that pretty much every African-American community or Black community family in the U.S. today has had the talk with their kids about something happens, you don't call the police because the police will make a bad situation worse. Can you speak to that at all? Xavier's what, 16 you said, and sorry, X is 16. So, like, have you had that talk? And what to me, it's just as a dad, I'm like, I can't flipping imagine having that. Probably no white families have that talk, but can you speak to that at all? Because it's just
absolutely, it is, and you know, it's a talk that you don't have. It's not a one and done talk. How about that? It's be mindful of your presence, be mindful of your surroundings. We have friends of ours of an organization called Jack and Jill, and just a few weeks ago, we took the kids in our chapter through the protocol and the procedures of what you do if you. So that's one of the things that, you know, we just continue to talk to the steering wheel. You talk calm. You tell the officer, I'm about to go into my glove compartment to get my paperwork. That's not the time to argue. That's not the time, you know, to state your case. Is that we go over with them.
And as you think about what's going on, and we'll dive into your standout roles. Are you optimistic about where we are right now? Just your point of view, but your point of view as you look around and you see what's going on in the world. Are you optimistic? Are you concerned? Where's your heart and where's your head in terms of the future?
I am optimistic, and partly because I have an optimistic nature, but also it's not even partly, it's attributed to my faith. I look at things not for what they are, but what for what they could be and the possibilities. And I try to be very possibility minded. I try to be very abundant minded. And so if I were to stay so concerned and still so boggled down, then I can't be effective in what I need to do as a stimulator to help other people get a better understanding, not only of themselves, but what they contribute to society and how they can use their strength roles to do that. So I'm optimistic, not only because I see so many allies that are marching alongside and thinking through legislation and thinking about changes that they can make internally in their organizations. I'm optimistic because I think people are saying, you know what, change needs to happen and I play a role in that. And so whatever I can do to support you in that thought, that's what I want to do. It doesn't matter if you're Black, white, Asian, Latinx, whatever. That's what I'm here for.
So before we dive into your top 2 strengths roles, one of which you got right, by the way, which was mine, strengths and combating something systemic like racism in this country. Where does, in your head, given your background, your academic background, but also your work now with individuals, where does individual strength sit in the frame of authentic action to make change? We shouldn't be here today. We absolutely shouldn't be here. We are here today at a time when we still have these systemic racist policies, practices, even beliefs. Where does strengths fit into that in terms of your practice and in terms of your view of the next 2 or 3 years?
Everyone has, again, a role to play, right? And I try to make the complex simple, if that makes any sense. And what I mean is that if I look at 400 years of racism, starting when slaves landed in Jamestown, and I think about, well, why were they brought here in the first place? Oh, free labor. Okay. Why did we have the Civil War? Oh, I don't want to give up my free labor because, and so you look about, you kind of do the steps backwards and say, it's about, greed, and it's about power and my ability to be able to, I don't want to say share, but it's greed is what motivated. And okay, well, what motivates greed? Fear of what? And so when we can be authentic and have a mindset of abundance and think about the other person as well, that it's not just about me, but it's about who I connect with, and it's less about me and more about us, then I think people can kind of get past it. I mean, part of the issues that why we have this as long as we've had it is because people have been uncomfortable with having discussions and making the changes that were necessary. And that's why, I mean, there has always been white allies as it relates to slavery because Underground Railroad. And then we talk about civil rights, and there were white people who were killed and injured during the process of civil rights. And so there's always been allies there, but it hasn't been widespread. And part of it is because it's uncomfortable to have the conversations, and oh my goodness, I may have to change, but I'm comfortable where I'm at. I'm comfortable with my paradigm. And the nice thing about strengths is the strengths tell us more about ourselves. And the more we do and lean into who we are in our strengths, then the less fear I have about things that maybe I can or cannot control, because I'm taking and I'm growing myself. And so that's how I for even when I realized teacher and stimulator, and when I realized, oh my goodness, I've been doing this like all my life that I can remember, but then I lean into it more and I feel more authentic about who I am, which leads to joy. And, joyful people don't go around suppressing other folks. That's, if they're, because they're satisfied with who they are internally, and they're not fearful about, well, if they get more money or they get more power, then, it's a very limited piece. I can't have mine because they're going to take some of mine. And that's the wrong mindset.
Yeah.
And that's part of why we're here.
Okay, I just got a call. By the way, if any of you want to ask Juanita Any questions that you may have on any subject, she's, I'm sure I'm speaking to you, but are you so happy to, it's okay. Ask anything you want. She can see him, I can see him, and we'll charge along like mad prunes. All the stuff that you talked about, the abundance that comes from knowing that you are your own human, you've got your own strengths. No one can ever have yours, nation of strengths that you do. And so there's nothing to protect. There's no there's none of that scarcity. But it is funny, don't you think, that your 3 kids are going to grow up and go to college, and no one will have ever really said what you just said.
Mm. And here's the point. If we, even before the university systems even came about, where did education for children happen? It happened in the home. Mm. And so I personally, and my mom's a teacher. My mom's was a teacher for 40 years. But my parents didn't depend on the educational system to teach me values and to teach me, and now strengths conversation never came up because you weren't around yet, but just being able to, instill in my children their uniqueness and the value of their uniqueness. And again, I take it from a faith perspective. We're all created with uniqueness and value and worth. Everybody, if you got breath, you matter. And so and I'm not saying all lives matter, so please don't get that the wrong way. Black lives do matter. Yeah. But my point is that as parents, or as mentors, as influencers, and I'm not talking necessarily about the role, but just in general, we have to seek value and worth into people, but parents have the primary responsibility of doing that at home.
Well, amen to that. And though, wouldn't it be nice if the education system would be helping convey that message? So a couple of folks have been saying, so what next? So what action next? One of the pieces of response that we got back from sending out the email and inviting you all to this was somebody said, well, we overcomplicated things a little bit. Like, why do we need to think about the standout strengths roles? Isn't just racism wrong? We should just take general action against. Well, on one level, yes. There are policies that need to be changed. There are reforms that need to happen. Having said that, as Juanita was just saying, you start with yourself. Like any action you take, you start with yourself. So what we thought we'd do, Juanita and I, would go through these 9 strengths roles. We're going to do them in reverse order, just to throw you off, but also because Juanita's top 2 are, well, I tell you what, why don't you share on the standout instrument? What are your top 2?
I am teacher first and then stimulator. And so with teachers, we have an instinctive reaction to all this, to let other voices be heard. Right? It's important for us to have the voices and hear them, and we find a voice that resonates with us. So there's a message that I'm going to, hear from some people that I'm not going to hear from others, even in the midst of the same conversation, because it's all about what resonates with me. I'm drawn to children's experiences. Just last night, I work with a group of kids, and we have a Toastmasters Junior. And I have 23 kids on, and I'm helping them be better public speakers and better leaders and managers and things like that. And so, but one of the things that even in conversations and this morning, and I don't think I even told you this, Marcus, I facilitated an inclusion workshop. And being able to ask those questions that cut to the heart, that give people to pause, that's what teachers do. We want you to think about the answer. We want you to consider all of the angles and then make some pivots and adjustments as it relates. So, teacher.
How many teachers? Show us some love. Have we got any teachers on the Instagram thingy right now? Just show us some love. We got any teachers? Yeah. Listen, if you leave with that, as Juanita said, you may think it's just like breathing, probably like you do, Juanita, but your questions are so powerful. So where do you start? Whether you're white, whether you're black, man, woman, young, old, if you've got teacher in your top 2 or 3, your questions, gosh, for you, maybe it just sounds so obvious, but your questions are penetrating to the truth. We need more questions. Ask your questions, see where people are at. You come up with better ones than most of the rest of us. So I'm sure this is the way that it plays out for you too, Juanita. It's, you don't take you ask questions and then you shut up. It might not feel like action, but it is action. Asking, listening is action. You do it better than anyone if you've got a teacher in your top 2. Refine your questions. Or, as I'm sure you found last night, with the Toastmasters, what are you finding with the next generation? Because teacher will think about the next generation. You can't help but think about What were you hearing last night?
I was hearing from our kids that, they're hopeful for the future, but they understand what's going on. And they're thinking about, well, what can I do now to make a change? Even yesterday, one of our, she's going to be a sophomore, was talking about, defunding the police versus reallocating resources. And this was a person who 2 years ago would not even speak. She was very shy. So to be able to see the growth has been phenomenal. But that's the whole point. And the simplest question that you can ask is why? You can say, tell me more. Tell me more. I want to understand. And sometimes you get a couple of levels down in why, and a light bulb will go off and say, you know what? I don't know. And then maybe that's where a change occurs.
So if you've got a teacher, you might not think of this as powerful action, but your questions, your whys, as Juanita said, they force people to answer about the reality of the world we all live in. And that's a good thing, clearly. That's part of uncovering is the whyness. Stimulator. I'm a stimulator too, so congratulations on getting that one. Talk to us a little bit about how Stimulator has helped you and what actions it guides for you in times like this, where we need change, we need transformation, we need confrontation. What does, for all, how many stimulators we got in the, just show us some love if you got any stimulators. Advisor Connector, we're gonna have to wait for. Sorry, Advisor Connector, we're gonna have to wait. Any stimulators? Yeah, we got some stimulators. Okay, cool. All right, so Juanita, talk about how has that played in you? How does that get manifest?
As a stimulator, I always think about energy, and I always think about the energy of the room. And I find myself a lot of times that I'm the only black face in a sea of white faces. I'm not uncomfortable with that. And I don't necessarily try to do things to make everybody comfortable with my presence, but I sense, curiosity, and I lean into that. And I try to always be very mindful of, how people are feeling. And especially now, I have made the decision to be very approachable so that if people have questions, that they're not turned off by asking me, because I think it's important to have dialogues and conversations. And so as that stimulator, I'm thinking through, how to create an environment where we're comfortable having hard conversations. So that's where, in the context of this, that's where Stimulator, I think, presents most for me.
Have you got into story? I mean, stimulators obviously they bring heightened drama to a thing so people can get it. Have you found yourself doing any of that? There is so much information hitting us all the time on social media, of course. Some of the stories are just like they just hit you in ways that pure facts and numbers sometimes don't. Have you found yourself stepping into any of those stories or narratives?
Absolutely. All I have to say is I have a 16-year-old son who's 6 feet tall and 200 pounds, and people automatically right there understand what's going on in my heart as a mom. That's all I have to say. And they get it. And what they, seeing a murder on television over and over again, I feel like people kind of get now what we've been trying to say that's been going on for hundreds of years. And so now people are more receptive and open to having conversations and considering where do I land in all of this and what do I do? And I get it that people are like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. And it's like, okay, let's start with you. Right. And then let's go from there.
What are your thoughts, not to put you on the spot, so to speak, but I'm going to put you on the spot. What's your feeling on statues? Because as a stimulator, you and I both know this, we're aware of the emotional valence of everything. Where's the country going? Where's the community going? Where's our family going? Where's this conversation going? Like we're aware of that. Have you got a sort of a point of view on where we stand with those things that we put up in our societies that announced and drew attention to something? Where's your thought for all stimulators on the phone right now? Where should we stand on things that are going to be part of the national debate? They are, aren't they, for the next, hopefully, a long time. Where's your point of view on statues?
That's an interesting question because statues represent things that are dead. So I don't give a lot of attention to stuff that is dead, but this is my thought. I actually saw an article, I think it was last week, about what folks are doing in Eastern Europe as it relates to all of the statues they took down of Stalin and Hitler and all those things. And where did those statues end? They actually they created like a statue cemetery so that the past doesn't necessarily go away, but it's out of view. Because the whole point of erecting a statue, which is what conquerors did back in ancient times, they erected a statue of the leader. Now, back then the leader was alive. So it's sort of like, there's Caesar, that's your king, that's the guy in charge. But these statues are of people who are dead. And so if they don't serve the national conversation and you don't want to destroy them because they are part of the fabric of the history of the country, put them in a cemetery. And those who want to visit them, by all means, and bring flowers.
I have not heard that. So, okay, if you're a stimulator, let's all of us, if we're stimulators, let's send that word out. Let's have a statue cemetery, and as Juanita said, bring flowers. The one point I would say on that is, for those of you struggling to figure out where statues fit in all this, remember, statues, as Juanita was saying, they're about saying this is your king, as it were, and he's part of the future. He's part of your future, dude. And that's what statues do. For stimulators, we know that that's what people are doing. They're trying to help us see some sort of future through the lens of that statue. And for all of us, we've got to consider, for anything that we choose to put up, it's not about the past. It's about the future. And we all have to think to ourselves, is that person's life, in terms of his or her cause, is that cause something that we want in our future? If it isn't, the statue goes into Juanita's cemetery. And that may even go for troubling characters back in my home country, the UK. What do you do with Winston Churchill? What do you do with Cecil Rhodes? What do you do with Colston? Well, these are people that did good things. And we have to push ourselves, going back to questions, Juanita, push ourselves to ask, well, what did that person stand for? And of course, the answer with George Washington might be different than the answer with Andrew Jackson. So those questions, super important. Well, let's keep going. How many providers? Do you have any providers on there? Okay, providers. Juanita, again, not to put you on the spot, but what are your thoughts? Obviously, provider is kind of stimulator's cousin, in a sense, isn't it? Providers are very, very aware of the emotional state of a particular individual. If you are a provider, where do you start from your vantage point as a coach around these words? Where does a provider begin their action against racism?
Well, with everybody, we start with ourselves, right? And we examine ourselves, we examine the words that we use, we examine the thoughts that we have, right? And providers, thinking about the emotions of others is realizing that right now, there's a lot of people who are hurting right now. And there's a lot of people who are confused right now. And there's a lot of people who are angry right now. And so being the host of other people's emotions and being able to be strong enough to say, I'm here with you in whatever form works best for you. And sometimes it's not saying anything at all, which is hard for people, right? So it's sometimes, yeah. No, not you, Marcus. But it's understanding things like, microaggressions. I'll tell you one of my favorite microaggressions. Wow, you speak so well for a Black girl.
Shut the front door.
There's
a quick question. When you hear that, got a flipping PhD, masters, the whole bat. How do you respond to that intelligently without being dismissive? And this may be not a provider question, so sorry, this is more maybe of a Juanita question, but how do you not go, when you hear that? Well, I won't even say what I would say, but what do you say in response to that?
Usually I just say thank you. Or if I'm feeling a little bit more punchy, I might say, well, what did you expect me to sound like? That's a hard question. And so it's the funniest thing. I remember my first job out of college, and I would answer the phones. And I remember one guy said, oh, well, Juanita, when I come to your office, and I just always talk to him on the phone, Juanita, when I come to the office, you know, something about, you know, get outside, get tan or something. And I said, well, I don't need a tan. He's like, oh, you go to one of those tanning salons? I was like, no, I'm black. Oh. Whole tone change, like, it was the craziest thing. Really? And, you know, but you know what? Part of it is when you live in a bubble, and that bubble is called privilege, and you're not used to having interactions with people who are different than you. And that's where I've always said, I give space for grace, but it's not infinitesimal space. It's not, you know, at some point, I'm going to need you to catch a clue and think about what's going on in the inside of your head and the inside of your heart. And so that's how I handle that.
You know, as you think about providers amongst you, as Juanita is saying, you have a unique ability to hold space. Mm-hmm. You have the ability to hold space for people's, and some of you who are not providers may be super frustrated with everyone just sort of sitting in their own pain. Like, move on, I take action, there may be some of you like that. But if you are a provider, you will be able to understand where people are at and hold it, which of course doesn't mean forgive the kind of microaggressions that Juanita is talking about. We're not, correct me if I'm wrong, Juanita, but you're not saying that, right? I mean, microaggressions need to be, those are real, those hit.
They do hit, but forgiveness is one of those things where, and you've heard this, so I'm going to put you in remembrance of something you heard a few months ago. Forgiveness is a gift you do for yourself. So I can hold on to it if I want to. It's not going to help me if I'm holding on to it.
Yes.
But you use that as an opportunity to say, this is how I perceive what you just said. And it hits me probably not in the way you may have intended, or maybe you did, but I'm making you aware of it so that you can shift your actions for our next interaction. You know, I'm not a big fan of cancer. I'm not a big fan of cancel culture, that you do one thing and we're done. That's not even grace. That's not forgiveness. We need to give people an opportunity to mess up and then allow them to course correct so that they can be the allies that we want them to be, and that they want to be, you know?
Yeah. Well, you know, that's what I'm doing. I'm messing up left, right, and center. I'm going to still keep trying a bit like you, I'm sure. But it's funny, you know, Rachel on our team got provider, and her talk too was really coherent in explaining to me, and this is, if you are a provider, you have this capability. You might think it's just everyone has it, but they don't. You have the ability to be able to explain why something that you're saying comes across in a particular way, lands in a certain way. And at these times where people are trying to listen to one another, your ability as a provider to be able to explain other people to other people, you might think, well, I shouldn't necessarily have the position where I'm explaining someone else's feelings to someone else. No, actually, that's a strength of yours. You have that capability. If you're a provider, you have the ability to put beautiful words to the emotional state of another human being. That is an action you can take to help other colleagues of yours or friends of or family members go, wait a minute, if you do that, that lands in this way. Mm-hmm. And your words around that will be super powerful. Okay, pioneer. We're going backwards. Pioneer. How many pioneers? Any pioneers? This is going to frustrate the pioneers because we are going backwards. Any pioneers in this little crew that we got here? Okay, so, yeah, talk to us a little bit. What's your POV on where do pioneers add value? Where do they start? Your thoughts on that in terms of combating racism and taking this movement forward?
Pioneers want to figure out a way to make this thing happen. They want to come up with creative ideas and things to just really push things and make them happen. So, you know, they're optimistic. And I appreciate that. I'm actually coaching a CEO in my private practice who is a pioneer, who's dealing with trying to figure out, and they're white, and they're trying to figure out how to navigate everything right now. And so I said, you need to lean into this pioneer role of yours to be able to see how you can, you know, rally your employees of different ethnicities, of different sexual orientation and whatnot, and you lean into that. And so that's, you know, what I see with that. But they want to move forward. They understand that, yes, this is how things are, but they see a better vision for the future, and they want to move us in that direction. That's what I think about with pioneers.
How is that going with that CEO, that Coach E of yours? Are you, and you said he was a pioneer, that was one of his top two? Yes,
they're a pioneer. Oh God, you get me to, I think Pioneer Creator. Pioneer Connector, I knew what to say. Pioneer Connector. And they're incredible. They are thinking, because they came into the organization that was financially and had issues, and people were very sensitive about a lot of different things. And unfortunately, some stuff happened because they've got some employees who are less thinking about the future of the organization and more about what can I get out of creating and causing chaos. And as a result of that, you know, they're just dealing with that. And so, you know, they're even thinking about, well, what do I do? What are my next steps? And I'm like, well, remember why you took on this role. You knew it was going to be a challenge when you came. Remember why. And let's lean into these roles of pioneer and connector so that you can move the organization forward the way that you want to.
You know, it's funny, as you talk about that, for those of you that are pioneers on the phone, I know it must be weird because there's some people, like creators amongst us, for example, who want to go back, who want to think about what caused all this, and who are sort of super frustrated with people that think that you can't make action unless you really, really think about the core causes, which is kind of a creatory thing to do. If you are a pioneer, though, the beautiful contribution that you can make, regardless of your race or your gender, is start now. Start now. Should we have done this 50 years ago? Absolutely, but start now. So your power around that to help all of us know are all, one of the things that I studied in college, Juanita, was entrepreneurship. I always remember interviewing Marcus. The thing you got to remember as an entrepreneur is the fastest way across town is stoplight to stoplight. You don't wait until the stoplights are green. And for whatever daft reason is a little stimulated, my little head just was like, well, I'll never forget that. And I, for whatever reason, never have. So pioneers amongst you, you're not waiting until the stoplights are green. You're going stoplight to stoplight to stoplight to stoplight. And that's so powerful because otherwise we're going to wait and wait and wait and wait and wait and wait and wait. And you can show us that, no, a little every day and a lot over time makes huge change. Influencers. Let's keep rocking and rolling. How many influencers we got? We got 12:37, so we got 25 minutes. Influencers. Have we got any influencers on the phone? All right, again, I'm going to toss it to you. It's all right. Then you can take me down avenues I don't expect. So, yeah, where do influencers start today? What's their contribution, do you think, Juanita, on this topic?
That influencer is the one who can go, for lack of a better phrase, toe-to-toe with antagonists. They're the ones who can have those conversations, but they're also thinking ahead. You know, if this happens, then this might happen down the road. And I'll give you a good example. When the protest started and Antifa came out of nowhere and started destroying property, right? There were protesters who said, hold on, this is not what we're here for. And you're not helping us. And you're not really for us if this is. And so they're the ones who are thinking, you know, if they're gonna blame the Black community for, you know, burning things down and looting and raiding when there's not just Black folks who are doing it, but then also there's some of these folks are catalysts in doing that. So influencers are the ones who are going in and saying, hold on now. Let's think about, you know, what's happening. And they'll call folks out. And it's necessary, right? Because they're the ones who are going to influence people's thinking. And so we need influencers everywhere. And just because that might not be your top strength, remember, for those of you who've taken the standout and you've had your debrief, you know that you have all of the 9 will show up in one way, shape, or form. So depending on the situation, you may show up in an influencer role. Yes. Never be afraid to talk about or to make action, even if it's not necessarily one that you would lean into more.
Yes, so, and that's such a good point. For those of you who don't have influencer in your top 1 or 2, One of the reasons why we define the roles as specifically as we do is so that you, whether it's influence, it could be number 9, you're still able to look at what that particular behavior is and draw strength from it and go, okay, that's what that looks like. You probably won't lean into that all the time. It might not be your most compelling, most authentic strength move, but there'll be times when you can learn from, even be inspired by a particular degree. As Juanita says, at this time, it's like silence is nobody's friend. If you see people saying things that are sliding by, your job as influencer is call it out. If you don't have influence in your top 2, look at someone who does and figure out how you can manifest that in your own life. We are leaning on you influencers to show us, and I don't mean that you should necessarily be confrontative. Everyone's got their own style of influencing, but you can show us, to Juanita's point, even if we don't have it, you can show us what confrontation looks like so that we go to everyone. We say, this will not stand. Every single anti-racism, or to let it slip back. Again, to reiterate, why are Juanita and I talking about this in a strengths-based way? Because this has to last. This cannot be something which was you look back, it was a nice to have. No, this has got to be part of your DNA. So moving forward, if you're an influencer, you've got to keep showing us how do you challenge people that let little things slide, a little comment, a little joke, a little this, a little that, whether you're in the police force or in your family, whatever. The influencers can show us if you let that slide, then this is,
it always starts small. And it just keeps rolling along. That's what happens. And if people are not cognizant of it, or it's just like, oh, and then that's the whole thing, oh, I don't want to get involved. I don't want to, and of course, listen, there's that big FOMO, fear of missing out, fear of being excluded, right? Of not going along and being the one who bucks the system. That's a challenge, and that's real. And so that's part of the reason why when you lean into your strengths, you can authentically say, I know who I am, I know what I stand for, I know what I don't like, and I lean into that role. But if you're not, then that's okay. And then sometimes, we understand that the Civil War divided families. And even the issues that we see now divide towns. Hey, we're living in a divided country. There's things that we can do, and it starts with us. And that's the point.
And for those of you that are listening on this and wanted to share this or whatever, remember, the definition of racism is hierarchy on different races, and then the differential action taken based upon that assumptive hierarchy. Okay, so all of us as influencers, if you are one, you're taking action to go that POV, whether it's based, as Juanita said, on greed and fear, it's stupid and closes us down to the inclusion of voices that we could otherwise benefit from. All right, equalizers. Do we have any equalizers? I saw some floating up by, yes. By the way, yes, our strengths give us courage and confidence. Yes, that's so right. As Juanita's saying, your strengths give you a really solid foundation. So, okay, I'm going to put you on a spot here. Equalizers, obviously, for those of you that have it, again, you might think, well, doesn't everybody have it? You're super powerful in your sense of right and wrong. You draw lines in the sand. You're righteous. You have a sense of moral order. In the context of that, one of the things, Juanita, that I've been wrestling with is, I was listening to, I won't mention who, but some sort of podcast around apology. And what do you need for a good apology? To right a wrong. And they were saying you need to say the behavior that was wrong, you need to apologize, and then you need to commit to moving forward, you're going to behave differently. And I'm listening to that and going, you're missing the one huge flipping foundation for all ways to move forward from a great wrong. And that is to make it right, restitution. So as we look at the transfer of wealth from one community to another, slavery or enslavement was probably the greatest transfer of wealth in the history of the world. You do the math on it, it comes to like $96, $97 trillion of wealth transfer from the black community, enslaved community, to the previously white community. What are your thoughts on reparations? What are your thoughts on how does one make it right? and I know I'm speaking equalizer language here, so maybe there's some equalizers who could probably answer better than us, but what are your thoughts on how to make it right before we move on?
Well, the first thing we have to also add to the equation is the number, or the disproportionate number of people of color who are in the penal system, who are in jail. And the fact that basically that's pretty much modern day slavery. So you have to add that to the equation. And just even the corruption that happens in our justice system that causes, you know, people of color to end up in jail for the exact same thing that somebody else who looks like you is going to get probation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, yeah, so part of that is that, and that's something that we can address right now, right? The justice system. If we look at the Stanford case, and obviously that's not a racial case, but if we look at the Stanford case, people were so outraged with what the judge did that he was voted out.
Can you remind everyone real quick? Can you just remind everyone which particular case you're referring to? Because that was really interesting.
Yeah, that Stanford rape case a couple of years ago, when the person who was at Stanford on a swim scholarship raped a young woman who was obviously inebriated or incapacitated, and there were two, and here's the great thing, two bikers going by saw what was going on and said, hey, you stop. So they intervened, right, and caused it not to be worse than what it was. But the travesty in all of that was the judge. Like, oh, well, you know, and the father who said, hey, well, you know, it was dumb. He's a kid, and, you know, and drinking and whatnot. It was like, no, that doesn't excuse it. So I use that as an example. It's not a racial example, but one that people can definitely relate to, is that people took action. First, the two bikers took action and intervened. Great. Then you had people who said, no, we don't agree with this judge's ruling, and so he's got to go. And so you've been seeing that some of the judges have been removed for really bad judgments, and not just in cases of, you know, domestic and sexual assault, but then also even in racism. And, you know, the fact that judges were being paid to send people to jail. Well, you know, because prisons, you know, are organizations where they're getting paid for the manpower. So back to restitution and reparations. Obviously,
can I hold you there for 1 second?
Go ahead.
If you have, sure. Just after this event, if you have specific places for prison reform. By the way, for those who haven't seen 13th, you should watch 13th. What Juanita is talking about in terms of this sort of movement from modern day enslavement is basically you are imprisoned. If you could, Juanita, think about where are the places to put pressure points. Equalizers, yes, but also the rest of us. Prison reform has got to take, that there is pressure to be applied. And so maybe we can all think about and then watch this space for the places where you can in your state, often this is a state thing, state by state thing, where can you apply pressure to get prison reform so that we don't keep incarcerating another bloody generation of Black Americans. Sorry to interrupt.
Right.
But
oh no, and that's fine. And you know what? One thing also is that for those who are innocent but they are still in jail, organizations like the Innocence Project is huge for trying to right some of the wrongs, and that's where we're seeing restitution, which is great in a sense. But for the larger picture of reparations and restitution, that's not an easy discussion, right? Because there's got to be. It's interesting because I think about. Let's just talk about gender, right? Well known, for every dollar that a white man makes, I will probably make 70 cents as a Black female, right? And so if you're an organization and you're trying to figure out, well, how do I even the playing field? Do I take the man from $1 to 85 cents to put the woman up, and so now they're on an equal playing field? It's not an easy discussion, right? But it's just a matter of finding maybe those pioneers who can think through those things. I don't necessarily have an answer, and God knows I would, but at the same time, it's one of those things where there definitely needs to be some things, and where that whole defund the police thing comes in, and I'm not knocking that. I definitely believe in police reform. I believe that we need to look at where we're spending our social dollars, see where it makes the most sense, and then making sure that we are making the investment in communities that need it, right? We understand that a lot of these cities, these urban areas happen because of redlining. And so what happens with redlining? The property values are lower, which means the schools don't have the resources that they need. And even when you throw lots of money, you may not have the right people who have the right thing in their mind in terms of what to do with the money. And so you've got a lot of, it's a lot of unpacking to do there. But if you take it chunk by, you know, as the saying goes, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. But you have to keep eating and you have to keep trying. So I think it's just a matter of getting the right minds together and figuring out what's going to be. But unless you have politicians and you get to vote them in that are even ready, willing to have that conversation, it's going to be, so the question is, for a pioneer, well, what do we do from here on out? You know, and so I think about what my parents did to make my life better. I think about what my life better, and then setting things up for generational wealth. That's why I thank you for the Thursday spotlights that you're doing for organizations, because to your point that you mentioned earlier, yes, power is linked to financial power, and financial power is linked to having your own. I'm not the greatest fan of our president, but I will say this. Years ago, he and Robert Kiyosaki wrote a book called Why We Want You to Be Rich. Now, I haven't read all the way through it, but the whole point was, you know, why we want you to be able to support yourself.
Yeah.
And you know what? And philosophically, there's really nothing wrong with that. Yes, I want to be able to support myself and my family. And there's nothing wrong if I need assistance, because, you know, the poor we're going to always have with us, right? But there's personal responsibility that we can all take to make our lives better. And really people just want a fair shot. You know, I'm where I'm at today because I was part of programs that recognized talent that I had, and they put me in minorities in engineering, and then, you know, helped me out, you know, and gave me the resources that I needed because I didn't necessarily have the same playing level. And what I did with those opportunities is what you see today. And so we just need to continue to do that. And that's definitely at least one direction that we continue to do. But I'm looking at the time and we still got a few more to go.
All right, so just to finish, if you want to equalize on this point, when Juanita talks about redlined neighborhoods and districts, we need to lean into you to go, what does that mean? Because it leads to tax basis, it leads to investment in education for those red line neighborhoods. If you want to know how you can help and you're an equalizer, step into your righteousness around how do we actually organize the distribution of resources in this community. Step into it. In your town, step into it. Call those judges to account, as Juanita was just describing. We need your power there as equalizers. There has been, and in terms of reparations, I put something on story today. Look at Robert Smith. Robert Smith is the wealthiest Black American. He's got a proposal for the provision of financial resources to Black-owned businesses, because frankly, as he was saying, 70% of predominantly Black communities don't even have a bank branch. Let alone if they had a bank branch, they wouldn't have access to the investment dollars. So for those of you that are equalizers, this is really meaty, specific, misaligned stuff. And we need your specificity around what's righteous about the distribution of assets. That is a city by city, neighborhood by neighborhood, judge by judge thing. And we need you to amplify equalizers. And in terms of reparations, look at Robert Smith's idea about how to do that over the next 10 years. It's fascinating. I don't know that it's the right thing. As Juanita says, reparations is a big issue. But frankly, as you all know, oh my word, I got 2 minutes. Okay, I'm going to shut up. Creators, I'll be very quick on creators. We need causes, root causes, really just get us to the root cause. That's super powerful. Connectors, any points on connectors you want to share in the 1 minute and 37 seconds, Juanita?
Oh my goodness. You know what, connectors, you all can continue to figure out how you can make 1 and 1 equal 3. So in other words, if there's a resource that you think I need to know about, don't think twice, send it to me. Yes. Send it my way and I'll do the same thing for you.
Okay, and then we'll come, by the way, if you want more of this, because I love, this is so great. I feel like we could dive down into what, if you want more of this, please let us know in comments. Advisors, advisors, quickly, pragmatic. You're experts. You think about the value of experts and the value of data, so keep with your experts, as Juanita was just sharing. Share them with us if you have them. Who should we listen to? Tell us the specifics of that. Amplify that. There's so much fake stuff out there. You're an advisor. Tell us what really works. One last thought from me, and I'll toss to you here, Juanita. Please tell us in your comments, what are the actions, what are the first 3 actions, what are the first strong actions you will take based upon what you've heard today? And if you want to hear more from Juanita and I around this subject, let us know in comments as well, because I think we'll be jumping back on the phone. Juanita, we got about 26 or so seconds here. Sorry to throw that at you like that, but any final thoughts from you around strengths and anti-racism and what we can do?
Again, it just comes down to everyone, your personal responsibility. Lean into your strengths, be authentic, and care. Care about each other.